Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Animation Appreciation Podcast. I'm your host, Liliana Stargazer, and today we're going to be covering Treasure Planet. For anyone who hasn't read the source material, Treasure Island, I have, and this is honestly my favorite adaptation. It fixes one of the biggest complaints I have about Jim Hawkins, as in the original, he is very much an, oh, okay, oh, you want me to go on an adventure? Sure! Kind of guy, not someone who seeks it out. And he kind of just does whatever he's told and gets kind of hauled along. He doesn't make any decisions or anything of his own, and that gets real old real quick. So, let's get started. Please don't forget that the scenery in the beginning is all hand-painted. This movie is a combination of 3D and 2D elements. It's actually one of the best examples of the blend. The ships and some of the space scenes are 3D, while most of the characters are hand-drawn. This movie is one of my favorite movies, and an obsession, mostly because of this blend of 2D and 3D elements. Just looking at the effect of his wind sail pulsing with the different fabrics, that's actually very impressive. And you can actually see that the wind sail itself fluctuates between 2D and 3D depending on how far away and or the angles we're going through. The subtle animation on the doctor's face, like the look he had when she said, "Ew," in reference to him being Jim's father. In the original story, Jim did help his mother around the bar and inn like he does here, though he wasn't as much of a troublemaker. He was actually a very good boy. Annoyingly good. My obsession with cyborgs might also account for why I love this movie so much. And yes, the inn did burn down in the book while they were watching, because of pirates. The map itself is a 3D element, one that is so well blended, it took listening to the extras to find out that part had been specifically 3D animated. Keep in mind, I went through these extras when I was like 15, and I'm currently 33. So I might have missed some details on the extras. I did watch them a lot when I was 15, though. The spaceport is entirely 3D with a few 2D people until we reach the dock with Jim. Jim's face is also just shows how much he loves the professor, but still finds him to be a bit of a goof. Facial animations will be highlighted frequently because they are so well done, and somebody did that on purpose. Take a moment to appreciate the animation on each and every species of alien and how each one is different and seems to have been actually thought out. When the captain lays hands on the map, her pupils actually expand and become completely round like a cat's, reverting to slits when she takes control of her emotions. In the background, we see circles in the windows of the captain's cabin. That is a throwback to how windows on the ships used to look, specifically in captain's cabins. This is also more evidence that this is a solar punk universe. Take a moment to appreciate the mechanical limbs on Silver, how each piece is moving in a realistic way. The shot after Silver tries to shake hands with Jim is actually one of the most perfect blends of 2D and 3D. The kitchen is actually a 3D model that was painted using custom materials to look 2D, but be a 3D set. They actually painted the materials on by hand. They actually told us in the extras. So this is actually one of my favorite animation techniques. That it allows them that the shot can have a circular kitchen that they can move through at will, while the 2D character interacts with the 3D elements in a perfect way with painted on lighting, shadows, and anything else that is needed for the scene to look realistic. This shot is actually one I refer to when discussing this technique. The helmsman casually wrapping a tentacle around the wheel so he won't drift away. And the alien with suction cups being in charge of the gravity. Well done. Here we see the doctor's suit is battery powered. 3D element space whales, where their eye is actually animated in 2D. The animation on Jim's eyes when he's looking around for who Silver is talking about when he says that he wishes to get him to meet two of his friends, Mr. Mop and Mrs. Bucket. It's a small detail, but it matters when the animation is good enough we forget someone did it on purpose. In the book, Jim is also the one who notices how awry the crew is, and he's the one the pirate first mate actually dislikes, which is one more way this is my favorite adaptation of Treasure Island. The small hints that Silver's the true captain, subtle but well done, just the way that they have the crew looking at him, and the small gestures he does, such as the lighting that actually appears on the first mate's face whenever he's misbehaving and John Silver wants him to look at him. The little shine when Morph washes Jim's boot. The transition of John Silver's eye to the sun. Well done. I love Jim's song. It tells the whole story without having to say a single word, while still showing his emotions at the time. With the knot, he showed John Silver his intellect, and Jim's dad in the book was mostly absent. When present, he was abusive, so having him just absent is actually a better change. His mother was stated in the book as saying, "Oh Lord, he's back. Jim, go to your room." And she kept him away from him anytime his father was in the room, so I'd much prefer the father just leave. Silver did take a liking to Jim in the book, but not such a fatherly way. More, I don't want a kid hurt in my plot, and I can manipulate this kid. To be honest, it was mostly the manipulation. The heart-wrenching moment we see where Jim's dad leaves, the body language of his mother, the watering of his eyes, and the heartbreaking pose and facial expressions they gave Jim. Flawless. 3D ships in a 2D world with 2D people, beautifully combined to bring the magic to life. Throughout every scene we see John Silver, there's always a constant motion of his cybernetic parts, mostly his eye and its various components. If you watch his hand and eye move, you can actually see that the motion seems plausible due to the way the parts themselves are interacting. 3D sun explosion. Once done with the explosion, the captain uses a nautical sextant just like they used to in order to give directions out in the open sea with no landmarks. How that works in the stars, I have no idea. Can just take a moment and remember someone painted that star and galaxy background. The slight tearing up we see at the bottom of Jim's eyes when John Silver is talking to him. A gorgeous touch, very subtle. In the book, the first officer was thrown overboard in a storm because he was a pirate starting to betray who they were and the plan, and John Silver did it. Instead of in this version, where the first officer of the ship was not a pirate, and the first officer of the pirates is the one who killed him. Both are valid options. The subtle nature of the sleepy shuffle of Jim Hawkins. Such a small thing to stop and look at, but at the same time, it's one of the things that makes this movie brilliant. This time, when we're in the galley going through the tables, it is another 3D model, also painted by hand. In the book, he was also accused of being soft on the boy, and he also had the whole moment of lying to the crew and Jim overhearing him. Like I said, this is a good adaptation. That being said, in the books, he claims the same thing was a lie, that he lied to the crew, but having seen his character throughout the book, I'm going to tell you now, in the book, he was lying to Jim, not the crew. And I like it better that he was lying to the crew and not Jim. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about the technique of painting a 3D model with 2D style. That is actually called deep canvas. It's legitimately where they built a 3D model of the space they want to create, but did not add materials and had someone come in and actually use the computer to paint the actual model as if it was a 2D animation. This allows them to move through the space like it's a 3D animation while adding the 2D characters in. Treasure Planet is not the first use, but it is actually the last use of this technique. The first use is in Disney's Tarzan, and this was created for Tarzan, for him swinging through the vines. I will discuss this in greater detail when I cover Tarzan. As they land on the planet, we see more deep canvas. Morph is always changing based on what's going around, such as when Jim is talking about the treasure, he turns into a treasure chest. Take a moment to appreciate the animation in Ben's face, such as his subtle eye expressions. I know he has some not subtle ones, but he does have some subtle ones as well. John Silver did, in fact, isolate Jim, well, not isolate, single him out to try to turn him against the men that he was with to join the pirates. In the book, it was more of an I don't really feel like killing a kid, but I will, and I can manipulate this kid. In here, it's he genuinely cares about Jim. So again, I prefer this version. It fixes a lot of my issues with the book. You can see the conversion from 3D to 2D when you see the crew picking up treasure. Ben's eye color changes from yellow to blue when his memory disk is reinstalled. And once again, now we see subtle eye motions of both Jim and Silver. Even the subtle shift with the captain and doctor as they embrace. Once again, as Silver talks to him, there's a hint of tears in Jim's eyes. Silver in the original material was not as lovable. Actually, he was more manipulating and just kind of... He really didn't want to kill a kid, but if the kid was in his way, he'd do it. Jim Hawkins in the book also took back enough treasure to set him and his mother up for life and joined the Navy. His mother didn't have to work, but she enjoyed working the inn, and it created a stable environment. They actually upgraded the inn to even more rooms and better staff and all that. Also, I just wanted to point out a small detail. Jim's hair in the beginning has ragged edges and is hanging loose at all times, so it's never really a smooth line, while here, after he has joined the academy, the line of his hair is nice and smooth, showing he has been brought himself into line and is no longer as wild and unruly. This adaptation is not perfect, but it keeps the heart and soul of the original story while still updating it. The original is very dated for its time, though it's still good. It tends to focus too hard on boring details and main character who's also kind of wishy-washy. This one livens it up and gives Jim a real backbone and a personality and a purpose, besides just being good little boy who does as he is told by his mother, the doctor, and everyone else around him. I have seen other adaptations of Treasure Island, and they fall to trying too hard to follow the source material. I believe it's more important to follow the source material's heart and soul than to actually follow the source material word for word. So, in my opinion, Treasure Planet is one of the best adaptations of the show, movie, book. It's one of the best adaptations of Treasure Island. And the 2D and 3D elements combine to make one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. There are many other movies who do this, including more recently, there's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and the Spider-Man movies with Miles Morales. I got chills watching Puss in Boots: The Last Wish because that means that they are playing with this idea again to blend 2D and 3D elements, and blending those elements is how you get the perfect films. 2D allows you more flexibility and world bending, but is not as realistic and has a hard time with 3D rotations of things. It's not impossible, it's just harder. Adding in 3D can bring the cost down for making 2D because 2D is expensive and allows you to maintain the believability such as what we have with Morph here, and without having to bring the cost up, because the money they saved by having the kitchen be a 3D probably is what gave them the ability to add so much into the 2D elements. 2D and 3D are best blended. There are times you need 2D and there are times you need 3D. 3D is more limited but cheaper and can make some realistic animations. But all of us have seen examples of when 3D was misused, and it was used to the point where it's kind of distracting. It's not, it might be cheaper, but I think that like kids shows should be 2D because that makes it not have uncanny valley problems. Oh Lord, I've been talking for like 15 minutes. My bad. Anyway, this movie is my prime example of what happens when you blend 2D and 3D, and it is one of my favorite examples of this. That being said, I think that's all I have for this. I actually did not script the last 4 minutes of this conversation. So I just really love this movie, and I'm glad I got to share it with you guys. So thank you for listening, and always remember, if it's animated, someone did it on purpose. Thank you again.